So just a little bit about myself. So I work for CT Skills as an apprenticeship recruitment consultant. I mainly support apprentices into different career opportunities in sectors like housing, childcare and education. And I also work quite closely with a range of employers and education providers to make sure that they also receive a smooth recruitment process. And then on a day-to-day basis, I also provide quite a lot of advice and guidance to young people to make sure that they're also navigating the career market correctly. So just a little bit about myself. I come from quite a heavy recruitment background. So I've been in recruitment for about 10 years now. I had a very short stint in housing. I was there for 4 to 5 years. And in that role, I did work my way up from sales negotiator to office manager. So I've interviewed as a manager and I've also interviewed for a range of different vacancies as well in quite a few different sectors. So hopefully I'm well equipped to give you some interview advice. So what we're going to cover today is how to prepare before your interviews, how to share best practice during your interview, how to close the interview effectively, any post-interview follow-ups, and some common interview mistakes that you can avoid. Okay, so the first thing we're going to go over is what to do before your interview. So the most important thing before your interview is making sure that you are prepared. So if you've got your online interview, a lot of interviews these days are via Microsoft Teams, via Zoom, especially for first stage interviews. So we'll always advise that you make sure that your digital platform of choice is downloaded onto your phone or laptop. Make sure you've got somewhere with good lighting and somewhere quiet to make sure you can prop your phone or laptop up. Make sure it's at the right head height for yourself. And you're also going to test and familiarise yourself with the digital platform to make sure that you avoid any technical issues that might come up on the day. If your interview is in person, so if it's a first stage interview in person or a second stage in person, we're going to make sure that you check your routes. So make sure you know what bus you're getting on, what train you're getting on. If you're driving, make sure you're checking journey times and make sure you're factoring in any traffic as well. So maybe leave a little bit earlier than what the sat nav says. And make sure you obviously show up on time to give a really good first impression for good time management. The next thing you're going to do is research. So we always recommend you research the company and the interviewer. You can use Google, their website, for example, and researching the interviewer, we would always recommend a little bit of a LinkedIn search. So have a look at their background, have a look at the company's page on LinkedIn as well to see what they get up to. We also would recommend 2 other ways of research, which are a little bit out there, but I would always recommend going on a website called Glassdoor, which is essentially a website where previous employees can leave a review for their old employer. So that's quite an interesting one. And then Indeed reviews are also a good one to have a look at any feedback that people have on the company. The next thing that's really important is to practice your interview questions. So most employers these days will use competency questions as part of their interview, just to see what your thought process is like in certain situations. So what they'll be looking for is what we call a STAR method, which is basically how you would answer a competency question. So usually it would start with you describing the situation, so setting the context of the situation. You would then explain your responsibility, which would be the task of the situation. You would then describe what you did, so your action, and then you would share the outcome, which is the result. So that's a really good way to practice for competency questions, and you can practice those with friends, family, before you go for your interview to make sure you've got some practice scenarios in your head. We would also recommend you looking at your CV. I speak to a lot of people that wrote their CV a long time ago and they can't remember what's on there. So sometimes they'll be questioned about some skills that are on their CV, for example, and where they've picked up those skills, but they've completely forgotten that those are on the CV. So make sure you are familiarising yourself with your content of your CV, making sure that it aligns with what you're looking for now, making sure that it's up to date in terms of companies, duties and dates as well. And lastly, your appearance. Whether your interview is via video link or in person, it's really important that you prepare your outfit. So making sure that you dress smartly. Unless it's been clearly stated that it's smart casual, make sure you always dress smart. So no jeans, for example, no leggings, no Crocs. I know they're very popular, but no Crocs to an interview. This will make sure that you are showing respect and making sure that you're taking things seriously. Okay? The next thing is during your interview. Obviously, everyone's nerves are quite high as soon as they sit down for an interview. So there's a few things that you can do to make sure that you're feeling relaxed during your interview. So the first thing that we'd recommend is obviously staying composed. I am a big one for breathing exercises, so making sure that you are remembering to breathe, and that you can also try what we call box breathing, which is where you breathe in for 4, hold your breath for 4 and breathe out for 4. That should over time relax your nervous system to make you more relaxed in the interview. I would also say to take your time during the interview answering questions. You don't need to rush to answer. If you're not sure how to answer the question, you can ask for the question to be rephrased or repeated. And if you want, you can take a notebook into the interview and let the interviewer know that you'd just like to make some notes about the process, just because some people will come out of an interview and they can't remember anything that's happened. So if you want to make a note during the interview, that's absolutely fine as well. Try and make sure that you're staying positive, nice relaxed body language, good eye contact. I know it might feel awkward to look directly into someone's eyes for a long period of time, but it's a really good way to show that you're engaged and that you're actively listening to the interviewer. And then lastly, I would suggest that you be authentic. Authenticity matters. Be yourself. I've definitely hired in the past over personality and just someone genuinely being themselves. It leaves a really, really good lasting impression with the interviewer. Lastly, we'll go over closing the interview. I really, really like when I'm interviewing someone and they have something to ask me. So I think it's really good to have some questions prepared. This could be something you've researched, or it could just be genuine curiosity. So some of my favourites are asking the interviewer, how did they get into their role? You know, if you've researched them, you might potentially know that, but maybe it might be nice to hear that from their perspective. You could ask what a typical day looks like in this position. You could also ask if there's any training or career progression available, and that of course will be quite important if you're looking for a job role where there is future career opportunities. After the interview, there's a couple of little things that you can do, nothing too crazy, but just to show that you are genuinely interested. So you can send a follow-up email, just something quite light, saying thank you for your time, for example. This usually is within 24 hours, just to reinforce your interest with the role. You can express your appreciation for their time, for example, make it really polite, concise, and obviously limit your follow-up to just one very well-crafted email, nothing too heavy. You can also reflect on your performance, so you might want to go home and note what went well, any areas for improvement for future interviews. If you haven't heard back after your follow-up email, you might want to send a polite follow-up if they haven't responded at all, just saying, you know, just want to check within the stated timeline that you might have a decision by now, just wanted to check if there's any decision that's been made. And then, of course, keep your options open. I would always recommend, until you've physically signed a contract or got an offer from a company, make sure you're continuing to apply and network whilst you're waiting for feedback and decisions. Okay, and then a couple of interview mistakes, and it just sort of reiterates what we've gone over actually. So try and not use any filler words, so words like or you know, for example. Try not to speak negatively about any previous employers. It's absolutely fine if you've had a bad experience with a previous employer, but maybe try and focus on how that made you feel rather than focusing on the employer. Try and ask questions. Not asking any questions at the end of the interview might mean that you're not quite engaged or not curious about the company, and being unprepared. There's a couple of others, of course, on the screen, so like poor body language, and arriving late, of course, which is one that we covered earlier. So, very quick recap of what we've covered today. So we've got how to prepare for the interview, best practices during the interview, how to close the interview, how to follow up effectively, and common interview mistakes. Okay, I've got 1 or 2 questions that I want to go over with you guys that we've received in, but on this slide here, I just wanted to open up the advice links if anyone wants any future advice or any follow-up of context really from today's session. So if you wanted to, you can drop us an email. You can also send us your CV if you're actively looking for work, and we can provide advice on your CV. And we can also let you know if you've got any opportunities that would be well suited to you. So that's just the recruitment@ email. If you'd prefer to speak to someone by telephone, we do have a customer service team, so you can contact them via the number on the screen and press option 2, and that will get you through to someone in the customer service department. So I've had 2 questions in actually, so we'll go over those very quickly. One of the questions I've had is how you can handle nerves during your interview, and especially when you're in an interview that's a high pressure situation. So one of my biggest bits of advice is to shift your mindset. When you go for an interview, yes, they're interviewing you, but you also are interviewing them to make sure that the role is a good fit for you as well. So it's really important that you go into that interview in the sense that you can also interview the interviewer. Make sure you prepare and make sure you use some breathing techniques before you go in for an interview. And then the second question I've had is, what are good interview questions to ask at the end of an interview to leave a strong impression? So we touched on this quite a little earlier, but there's 2 questions that are my favourite. One of them is, what's your leadership style? And that will give you a good understanding of how you're going to be managed and whether that is the right fit for you. And you can also ask them why they enjoy working there. So that can give you a good idea really of what they enjoy about the company. One of my other favourite answers actually is, what is the company culture? You know, you work for some companies that like to go out for a drink on a Friday, a gathering. You have some companies that don't have much of a company culture, and that might work quite well with you as well. So it's really important that you are interviewing your interviewer to make sure that the role is right for you as well.